Okay, thanks, Marissa, and thanks, Tom. So I just started sharing screen. Hopefully that's visible. Good?
Looks good, Steve.
Okay, great. We have, Tom said this really is, today is the official kickoff of GLASSNET, but we've been working, thinking about how to structure this week and how to get the most out of it, because you are our dream team of people, and we know you're all really busy, and we really do respect your time and want to get, but we want to get a lot out of our limited time together. So I'm gonna start off by talking a little bit about my motivation and why I'm so excited about GLASSNET and working with Tom and working with all of you. I think most of us have been in situations kind of like Raffaello's question, where as the science people, the analysts, we have really been pressed for coming up with better methods and better tools to assess sustainable development. So Tom put up the slide, of at least a portion of the sustainable development goals, and how are we going to be able to advise decision makers, the world in general, about the trade-offs and synergies among these goals. How do we achieve them? Where are we headed? So that's certainly my motivation. I know that there's a large, there are large international meetings that are happening later this year, both around climate in Glasgow and around the Convention on Biological Diversity happening in China later this year. And there really is a feel, I get the sense, especially from the decision-making side, the policymakers, that they really do want to have a better set of tools and methods going forward, better information, scientific basis for their decisions. My own personal kind of exposure to this, I was part of the IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, their global assessment, which came out a couple of years ago. Many parts of that were pretty disturbing, in the sense that ecosystem services or nature's contributions to people are largely in decline, biodiversity is largely in decline. So how do we address these issues? This has continued on. There's been a number of high-level reports, even so far this year in 2021. So the left is a report from UNEP, kind of a follow-on or a synthesis from the IPBES reports, IPCC reports, UNEP reports, and so on. And on the right is a report that was commissioned by the UK government on the economics of biodiversity, or also known as the Discuta Review. So there's a lot of momentum in this. And for my purposes, I think about thinking about the measures that we have that capture headlines, so GDP, the economic measures, that arose in the 1930s out of a need for better economic performance metrics, to help guide economic policy. Well, I don't think it's a stretch to say that we're in the midst of a great degradation of natural capital, or ecosystem services, or nature's contributions to people. And we need a better system of metrics that can help guide sustainable development goals. So to me, that's the motivation for doing all this. Obviously, that's a huge undertaking, which can't be done by any individual or basically any individual group, but it really does need a network or a network of networks, which is what we're about here. So just a few words on sort of how did we get where we are now. So leading up to this meeting, so we had a survey of GLASSNET Science Committee members early this year. This is what we asked them to fill out. So what do you see as the key pieces of existing knowledge and data and models which should be included in our thinking? How can we best facilitate that integration? And then also, what are the major gaps in our knowledge and data and modeling efforts, and what are the major challenges to providing a more comprehensive integrated assessment? And I'll pause here on 5, because I'd like you all to be thinking about this also this week, all these questions, but in particular number 5. what would you view as success for GLASSNET by the end of the 5-year project? So where do we want to be? What do we want to have seen accomplished? I would be very interested in hearing where people, what we want to do with this opportunity that we have. So we harvested the ideas from this survey to help design a meeting of the science committee, which happened in early April. And from that science committee meeting, we fleshed out basically what we thought of as ideas for, or the starting point for the working groups, and what we thought working groups might start in on doing. We also, very importantly, asked the science committee who we should have come to this meeting, like who should be here. And so this is how we populated the meeting. We basically asked them, who's really essential to have here, and that's how we got all of you. And I'm very glad that you all have joined, and to help out, basically help form this network of networks. So we harvested and synthesized the ideas from the science committee to help design this meeting. Okay, so who is this mysterious science committee? I think most of you will recognize at least some of the faces here. These are people from the various networks that Tom has already identified. This is not the final list of networks or the final list of people, but anyway, I hope you recognize at least somebody on this group, because they certainly recognize you. That's how you got the invitation. So from the science committee and that science committee meeting in early April, we put together actually 4 ideas for working groups. I'm going to talk about just the first 2. So the first 2 really focus on kind of the science. What do we need to do in order to better integrate models and knowledge to be able to address the integration of the sustainable development goals from global to local to global, as Tom has stressed. And the first one is really focusing on linking of economic, ecological, and hydrological models. It's not to say that other things like climate, crop modeling, and so forth aren't central to this as well. But we were really focusing on thinking about getting into the macroeconomic models, all of the rich understanding of what happens in ecosystems and how when we change ecosystems that affects outputs, and also what are the drivers from, say, global markets to how people make land use choices, and hence how that changes the flow of benefits that come from that. So you can see a set of questions that kind of came out of that meeting, and what people thought of as interesting questions and topics for this working group 1. And we'll be breaking into working groups on this, both 1 and 2, later today, and then on beginning part of Wednesday. So working group 2 was focused on land, water, and climate systems. So basically at the nexus of the SDGs. So how do we link land, water, and climate research in order to accelerate SDGs? Now, to my mind, these are both of these working groups are coming at similar topics. So don't worry that there's overlap. That is perfectly fine. In fact, I think that's good. We would like there to be. We don't want these to be like totally separate activities that are hard to then bridge. This is really a bridging exercise. But anyway, you can see here the types of questions that came out of the science committee. What I'd like to say is these are just starting points for the discussion this week. These are not the ending points. I mean, that's why you are all here, is to actually flesh this out. If you think that we need to go in a different direction, that's fine. This is really, as I say, it's just the starting point for these discussions. And we'll talk in a bit. We'll come back and focus on, like, what do we really want you to do in the working group sessions, and Marissa will lay out many of the logistics. So I will stop with that and turn it back over to Marissa.